Nel presente, torniamo nel mondo reale, direi facciamo un applauso a Silvia Rovere per quanto metafisico e con lo stesso applauso apriamo i lavori perché ho il piacere di chiamare Luca Bonaccorsi di PVC che ci accompagnerà nella guida della prima delle tavole rotonde del pomeriggio. Tavola rotonda impegnativa in quanto andiamo ad affrontare... Scusa, non ti ho dato il microfono perché io ci ho agganciato la cravatta, quindi...
Sì, no, io...
intanto vedo che c'è qualcuno in piedi, qui davanti qualche posto c'è, quindi prego.
Non siate timidi.
E ti lascio il palco e sto ad ascoltare perché nella costruzione della conference molto molto interessante. A te.
Grazie. Ah, ecco, volevo fare link. Questo è un incontro in inglese, lo svolgeremo in inglese, però faccio magari, Luca, una breve intro in italiano e poi vi presento le nostre fantastiche ospiti. Mi chiamo Luca Bonaccorsi, economista, oggi lavoro a Price. Il tema che dibattiamo oggi è impatto e norme europee, nel doppio senso dell'impatto che le norme europee avranno sul business, ma anche dell'impatto, che è forse l'innovazione la più grande nelle nuove norme europee. Inizio questi incontri oramai da un paio d'anni sempre scusandomi, chiedendo scusa. Prima di raggiungere Price un mese fa e tuttora faccio parte del gruppo esperti di EFRAG, quindi sono uno dei coautori degli ESRS, della CSRD, e prima di quello facevo parte del gruppo di esperti della Commissione europea che ha scritto la tassonomia, quindi mi dispiace, scusate, non è tutta colpa mia, non l'ho fatta da solo, però è anche un po' colpa mia effettivamente. Carriera stranissima, ho iniziato come asset manager, in realtà come proprietary trader a Londra con BNP Paribas, che vedo qui stasera. Poi innamoratomi del tema per motivi tutti i più sbagliati possibili, ho fatto l'investigatore di crimini e di catastrofi ambientali per quasi 10 anni con dei media internazionali e nazionali. E poi sono arrivato a Bruxelles a fare l'advocate, a fare il lobbista in realtà. Nella società civile è vietato chiamarli lobbisti, ogni volta che dice la parola lobbista paghi da bere a tutti quanti, nelle CSO e nelle ONG. E da lì è partito ovviamente di ex asset manager che lavoravano nelle ONG, a Bruxelles ce n'è assai pochi e la commissione mi ha individuato presto. Quindi, oggi invece il mio lavoro è, credo, quello più importante dal punto di vista dell'impatto, che è quello dell'implementazione. Ci è arrivata addosso, ci sta arrivando, ci è arrivata addosso e ci arriverà addosso una grandissima mole di nuove leggi che sono innovative per quantità e anche per qualità. L'implementazione è la chiave del successo di questa operazione, ovviamente. Io oggi sono nella condizione di pensare e di credere, anche se la metà dei miei amici non mi risponde più al telefono, che lavorare in una Big Four e aiutare un fondo a implementare la legislazione è forse ha più impatto che lavorare in una ONG, però magari mi illudo. Allora, qui finisce l'introduzione, il tema è questo. I'm going to switch to English, and apologies for this brief Italian introduction. I'm going to introduce you our amazing guest, and thank you. It doesn't happen very often to have a panel of women. Thank God for that. Well done, De Salone. I have here with us Ophélie Mortier, Chief Sustainable Investment Officer from DPAM. Welcome, and thank you for being here. Coline Pavot, Head of Responsible Investment Research at La Financière de l'Échiquier. Apologies for my French, it's atrocious. It's as good as it gets. And Chiara, Chiodo, Regulatory Policy Advisor. She's also a lobbyist from EFAMA. EFAMA and the people I've been working with, we've been seeing eye to eye very often during the taxonomy. But we're not going to talk about that. So I was briefly introducing the theme, European laws and impact. I think in both ways you could possibly read it, as in the impact of the new European laws, but also impact as a factor, as an innovation in European laws. So I would ask a first round of comments from you on, I mean, the last 3 years we've had SFDR, Pillar 3, taxonomy, and now CSRD. with you know, the next year we'll have new guidelines also for financial institutions for the sustainability report of funds and banks, which is not a very well-known fact, but it is coming. I would start with a generic round of comments. How are you coping, and what is your take? Is this the big bang that we needed? Is the change that was needed in the market? Are we finally getting serious about this, or is it just an awful amount of red tapes that is coming and introducing a silly amount of costs to our companies? I'll start from my neighbor.
Okay, so thank you. Does it work? Yeah? Okay, thank you. Grazie mille. So first of all, I think it was necessary, all this regulation, because we lived, when I started 20 years ago, we had nothing about regulation. So we need a framework. The fact is that we had really a sort of catch-up by the European Commission regarding regulations, meaning as well all this instability, probably also the devil in the details, which make our life not so easy. I think that it's possible to work with it, and particularly when you have a long experience, because if we take SFDR, for example, it's a regulation regarding disclosure, and I think it's important to remind it. For the moment, there is a lot of questions regarding SFDR. We have an important consultation regarding this, but first of all, it was regarding disclosure. And when you, it was always a keyword for people who have worked on the topic for a long time. So it was also necessary to have something credible, because it forces us to have pre- and post-agreement commitment to ESG. So it's also very important. I don't say that it has fighted against greenwashing. Probably it has also creating some greenwashing, but I think that the fact that we have this requirement for more transparency, and at the beginning say what you do and do what you say, is very important in terms of fighting greenwashing. But of course there are several weaknesses with this regulation. I don't know if we speak about the weaknesses now or later on, but we can.
Round,
yeah. Okay. So we will touch the.
So they're welcome. You welcome them.
I welcome it, but it's a work in progress. We need stability, we need clarity, we need clarification, but I think it was required to have a credible framework. The aim and the ambition of the European Commission are really valid and required, but probably the implementation and the timeline are something that we can certainly improve.
That's great. That is great. And Coline, your turn. So are you also this positive? Is it a welcome, humongous amount of new paperwork to be done, or it's the revolution you were waiting for?
I think I'm quite also positive on it. Was really key for us to have this regulation now, because the market start to develop more and more sustainable investment without any general frameworks, and it was really hard for the retail investors to just try to invest in a sustainable way. Then this framework was really expected by the markets, but it have concretely a massive impact on the asset manager. It was not, and it's not today, easy to apply properly this regulation for many reasons. But if we mainly focus on the positive aspects, I think first of all, it's you talk about CSRD. We have a key challenges with sustainable investment, which is the challenges of data. And thanks to CSRD, we will it will help company asset manager to have data from the company, data which will be able to compare between each company, which will be a huge improvement. In maybe 5 to 10 years, maybe we'll have full taxonomy data set to also compare the impact of the company on environmental and social topics. And this is really key for asset managers to after be able to select the company thanks to this data. And I think another positive impact of this regulation is that it brings structure on the markets. because we talk about transparency, but there is also the logic of classification, which give a type of hierarchy between the approach of the fund, which is something positive, even if there is many limit behind. But as say Ophélie, for me, we need more clarity on many topics, and we need also, on my point of view, to go beyond transparency, not to stop only at transparency requirement, but also ask for concrete fund management constraint to make it more strong, and I think answer better to what retail investors are expected from these regulations.
Okay. Chiara,
I guess
not always the position of EFAMA, is it?
Yeah, I guess it's my turn, and honestly, I had some note on what I would like to say on those points, but what my colleague were saying on the stage, it's really, I think they touch on different points that are core for the industry, and as Luca said, we are a trade association, so we represent asset manager at the European level, and I have to say that indeed we highly welcome this framework when it comes to sustainable finance, from taxonomy to disclosure and to reporting. However, I think like what it's important to don't forget today is to make this implementable also for financial market participants. One core issue that we are facing is exactly the fact that disclosure came into place before reporting. So as an asset manager, we are dealing every day with a data gap that is going to be worsened if the political address that we are seeing that is approaching Europe, such as for the ISRS, the recent working program on the Commission, that want to, let's say, diminish the ambition of the reporting standards. I think like what I would like to say, the message is like we welcome all this framework, but I think it's key, it's important to ensure consistency if we want that really investment as an impact.
Okay. So I hope all the colleagues are you're just as happy to have taxonomy and SFDR and Pillar 3 and the like. Let's get into some details, though. Let's start from SFDR, the most challenging pie and the most useless. Is there one? I have an idea, of course, but do you have some anecdotal evidence of stuff that really doesn't work, stuff that is really challenging, stuff that is very, very useful?
First of all, I think it's important to remind why the different concepts, key concepts of SFDR are. So what is the big challenge for me regarding the principal adverse impact indicators? Of course, you have the issue of data. And we all know, for example, that the pie on biodiversity or on waste is a very challenging one. So a first recommendation would be to reduce the list of the pie to some indicators where we are mature in terms of data to report. But the most important for me is also the use we do with that. Because now I see more and more, because people do not really master the information and the concept, and they ask you to compare the pie of your company with other ones. This is completely unuseful. We should not do comparison between the pie from different entity levels. So my first recommendation is that at entity level, it does not say anything, the pie, because it hides so many details. If you have a lot of, I would say, like us, we have an important emerging market debt in sovereign. Of course, we will have carbon footprint or carbon intensity higher than a portfolio which is focused on European actors, for example. So you have so many differences that, for example, comparing the different pie between the different asset managers, even at the fund level, is, I think, a very challenging exercise. So with the pie, to be honest, I do not really see why we have this in the regulation, because it does not say a lot regarding the intrinsic quality of the sustainable quality of a portfolio or at entity level, because it hides so many details. So we should reduce the list to a couple of indicators with the open window to explain what is behind those figures. And the second key element is, for me, the trajectory. It's much more important to see the trajectory of these kind of key elements than looking at the absolute level as of today.
Yeah, but if you take the pies out of the SFDR, what remains? I mean, honestly, I'm gonna provoke you. I'm gonna play devil's advocate.
I said reducing the number of pi. But
there are only 14, and you mentioned biodiversity. But last thing I remember, biodiversity. There's basically only the address of a company, whether it's based in a key biodiversity area, no, and have any impact. There isn't much on biodiversity on the pies.
But there is one indicator which is broadly defined, and it's not possible to reduce biodiversity to one single metric. That's our point. So it's very important to integrate biodiversity in your portfolio, but again, it's so complex and so broad concept that reducing to one single metric does not say a lot about biodiversity.
I totally agree. You remember there were 6 or 7, and they were all slashed by someone asking for less indicators during the negotiations. But anyway, SFDR, let's go on. Yes,
Yeah,
well,
maybe
you think your favorite indicator and the most useless, or also you think that there should be less?
On the pie, for me, there is various challenges. We have no access to data. The quality of the data is really difficult. And on the reporting, for me, it doesn't mean anything at fund level or at the asset manager level, because there is no comparison. We ask maybe if we can put the pie report for the index of the fund to have a comparison for a client, because when you will see the result for the fund, what does it mean? If I take a fund from Ophélie asset manager, I will not be able to compare it because it's not the same data provider, maybe it's not the same coverage. Then for me, we really need to compare this data to something, and today there is no comparison basis on the reporting. And for me, there is a big question about what does it mean concretely consider the pie, which is the definition of SFDR. It means maybe just look at this KPI when you're doing your ESG rating. It can mean maybe having a minimum threshold for each pie when you select a company. There is many vision of what concretely does it mean consider pie. But for me, if you want to do it really seriously, you cannot do this plus having French, German, Belgium label, plus having maybe French regulations that you have to follow, etc., because there is too much extra financial constraint, and you cannot do everything well. And today, with all this regulation, my point of view is that it's happened too late. Then many asset managers were doing many things on their fund, and they had to add European regulation on the top. And then, if you add on the top, you just try to tick the box and to answer as much as possible to all the answer, but you are not able to do it very well. Each of the aspects, do well sustainable investment, do well PI, do well all the things that you were doing before. Then it's really hard to manage.
But this is still very generic. I was expecting, for example, that someone would mention Scope 3. Isn't Scope 3 a nightmare for many, or?
There is many new nightmare. Scope 3 seems to be quite okay for the moment. Okay, it's not perfect, the data. Some sectors are not covered, but we work on it from many years, and compared to biodiversity, it's quite cool.
Right.
Scope 3, we have the assumptions. We are transparent on the assumptions we use to anticipate and calculate the Scope 3. So you have some transparency. It's not perfect, but you have quite a solid framework behind the Scope 3 emissions compared to biodiversity. So I think, and it's also important that we do not slash all the things in regulation, because even if we do not have the perfect data, we should start with something. So it means as well, and that's the danger with all this regulation, that the data are used as the religion or the dictatorship to say what you have to do. But it's important to say, okay, let's start with this data and improve and build the portfolio construction and investment decision-making process. Otherwise, we will never do something. And it was also important to start with something. And I think that the pioneers in ESG around this table, they have also started with something that they know, and we have the humility to say, okay, the models are not perfect, and that's why it does not have to dictate the portfolio construction. But it's also important to integrate some of these, otherwise you will not do anything.
Okay. Chiara, you're not an asset manager, but maybe you do have a PI that you hate in particular?
No, we love all the PIs, definitely. I have to say that as we are discussing, more it's clear how different practice, and indeed every business, every core business face different problem. So I think it's difficult to streamline in just one response, like this pie should go, this one should stay. Also, it's not, honestly, I think, on us to decide what really is meaningful and impactful to be there. But I think like what is important is really like rationalize the disclosure requirements, try to streamline them, try to give them really a meaning that we can have also more understanding of the measure of what is behind. Because indeed, I think like from our members, what we hear the most is biodiversity. Indeed, also on GHG emission, there are different concerns when we get data due to the differences between estimates data, missing data, and so. But always we are already talking a lot about, I think, allegation of greenwashing. So I think it's really important to rationalize, I will say, and streamline what is really meaningful to disclose.
Okay. You've all mentioned, the imperfect nature of KPIs, fixed KPIs, and also biodiversity. So there's two more pieces of legislation that I think that are relevant to us. One is clearly the taxonomy, and the other one is the CSRD now. So CSRD, and you might like it for that, does not, as you know, over the spring, we've gone, thanks to the Commission, from having lots of KPIs, because we thought that the pies were a great idea, they were the same for everyone, and we could aggregate them, and we could finally have comparability, compare your fund to your fund to your fund, no? As an investor, as a citizen, also as a user. But then the Commission changed their mind, so they abolished all mandatory KPIs, there are no pies, like you wanted at Ophélie, and all we have is a double materiality. In the double materiality, the corporation itself, by itself, decides what are the material KPIs. So there are no fixed KPIs anymore, and you will have to aggregate data. How is that for comparability and quality of information? Is there an improvement, or have they just turned a headache into a massive migraine that can sort of put us to sleep forever?
I think clearly it's a headache because, first of all, CSRD in its initial phase would not solve all the issues of the mandatory PI because several are not in the CSRD, some are not covered by CSRD. The second challenge, we all know that CSRD is not for all companies, so you will remain stuck in regarding data for small caps or companies which are not in CSRD scope. But now, as you said, they have opened this door to some flexibility and quite great flexibility for the corporates, which is not the case for the financial participants. So clearly the challenge now is to have a clear answer from the European Commission to have an alignment between the different requirements for the different actors. Either you open the door on double materiality assessment, and this is the case for everybody, or you close the door for everybody. But living in a world where the financial participants still have to report and the companies are not obliged to report makes our life more complicated, and again we will rely on approaches with data, ESG data providers and all these things. So we remain with the same issue, even if all the data providers are looking for the best information and trying to improve the information. Of course, the closer to the source of the information, the better the data will be. So, indeed, it's a big headache, and that's why I guess Chiara will say why the asset managers are requiring for an alignment of the requirements.
Just to give some background, I mean, most of you have real jobs, so you don't have to spend days in expert groups in Brussels. Now, for those that have missed sort of, le puntate precedenti, the debate until a certain point this year was with finance and the academic community asking for pies in the CSRD, and let's say Business Europe, so the corporation, non-financial entities, asking for pies to be abolished and for the CSRD only to define a process. Now, we know how it ended. Business Europe won, and so we have no pies. We have no equivalent of the pies, but everything is subject to materiality assessment, which is the reason why we will need guidelines, because how do you aggregate this data that comes out of the CSRDs or company, and how do you do your own sustainability report? Is there any, can I have a round of comments on what will be the approach of, say, of funds to the new sustainability report requirement? Chiara, you want to start?
I think I don't have a reply for that, but maybe it's a bit provocative. It's like, are guidelines enough if you want to be sure that the data that is the solution guidelines for financial market participant, or rather ensure that financial market participants have enough information and not just what is at the corporate side is diluted, because I think that's my perception on this.
I think as often we ask more to investors as what we ask to the companies, and we will have to manage to do something without information. Then we will buy data from extra financial rating agency. We will be asked directly data to the companies, and we will try to design a reporting, which will have to follow a regulatory framework, which is not very open, let's say. But I think what is key for us is not to just stop to this compulsory reporting expectation, because it doesn't mean anything to the clients. And even if we publish it publicly on our website, I think it doesn't mean anything for the client. And I think that the European regulation is not very retail investor friendly, on even not only retail, but also wholesale investor friendly. Then we have to continue to do our own reporting, which will be much more clear, which means much more easy to understand, to help the client to take the investment decision. And we will try to focus our energy on making this reporting as serious as possible, as strong as possible, as also pedagogical as possible. But at that time, it seems to be hard to transform this PI report in something incredible. We'll just try to make it as seriously as possible. Maybe trying also to explain the limit of this reporting in terms of quality of the data, in terms of coverage, etc. But at the beginning, I hope we can transform it to something better. But the reality is that there is one regulatory framework, and it's really hard to do something different of what is expected. Then we'll try to do it out of this regulatory framework as we were doing before the regulation, and continue to do that job.
And if I may, what is also important is that all these PI are, for the large majority, if not all, are backward-looking data. So it's the past information, and if we want to finance, and that was clearly the objective of the European Commission, it was to finance the transition, finance the real economy. So if you want to finance the transition, and it's probably something we can discuss later on regarding the categorization, but if you want to finance the transition, it's based also on the forward-looking data, meaning because several companies today, they are not yet there. So the backward-looking data, like their carbon emissions and all these things, are probably not so good. But the idea is to bring those companies to the best ones. So we need forward-looking data, and that's why it remains very important to use, and that's why, as Coline said, what does it mean taking into account the pie? It should be related also to all these aspects of future, engaging with the companies, voting according to what you think in terms of convictions, to ensure that you go to the transition and not to something looking at the past, which means that you finance only the best ones because as of today they are already super green or they have very good indicators in terms of this backward-looking data, but their transition is almost finished. So the impact will be very limited in terms of ESG.
No, I see that, but the CSRD, and by the way, with my EFRAG's hat, the EFRAG is setting up advisory groups for financial institutions. I'm sure most of you know, but you can still apply and be part of the conversation of what should, we call it the NF in Italy, no? The sustainability reporting. What should it look like for a fund? What are the KPIs you cannot not report, and how should you aggregate those? That conversation will happen in the next 6 months. So please do reach out and give us your feedback. But going back to, so CSRD has one thing, transition plans, for example, in climate. It does require to tell me your targets, by when, the decarbonization level, and the resources that you're putting to it. So, Ophélie, as you were saying, it is a forward-looking bits of data. That goes in the right direction, I guess. And it's got another thing, which we haven't talked about yet, but we should give it a round of comments. It's got impact. Impact went from being a niche and an exotic things for super progressive investors, some of which are in this room, if they have a friend there, to being the new mainstream standard. Impact, every company will have to assess its impact in the short and medium and long term on all the sustainability matters. So these two things, forward-looking elements, transition plan, and impact, are quite some innovation, aren't there?
But for me, the big issue with impact is that what you said, we do not have a clear definition of impact. If we speak about impact, like I would say close to private equity, impact investing, financing sustainable objective, I would say, okay, it's product, services of the company. But could we consider impact, the fact that the company is moving to a transition, is improving the environmental information, the social performance, the governance? So we need a clear definition of what is impact and what is not impact, because I think that the fact that you make, by engagement, for example, you make the company changing and going to better practices, it's also an impact that we should not underestimate. And that was my previous remark regarding the transition. I think that the issue today with the classification and the typology of SFDR, Article 8 and Article 9, I kindly remind some figures. Article 9 are only 3.5% of the assets under management, the market, compared to over 50% for Article 8. And it shows how it is demanding to be Article 9, because it has been positioned as a super dark green product, where finally the impact and related to impact, but finally where you cannot really finance transition, because notably due to the interpretation, notably due to media, they highlight every time you have maybe a company in transition which is not yet super dark and super impact company, it's highlighted as why is it in a fund Article 9? And I think that in terms of impact, we need a clear definition if, for example, moving a company to better practices, is it impact or not? Because for me, that would also allow to have a bigger mainstream move to impact, if we include as well this kind of impact, and to also have the transition companies.
Okay, I mean, I confess, I never I never understood why it was a problem to have a very dark green category, to be honest. I mean, we can have all shades of green, but if there is a dark green or an impact set of products, I think that it's a positive for the ones who have to choose. But anyway, sorry, Coline, your turn. You got there's two new things. There is a forward-looking element. There is also the anticipation of financial effects of sustainability methods. You know, E18 and E2, etc. In all sustainability matters, there is an element of first forward-looking transition plan, and then net present valuing of risks. This is introduced by the CSRD, and then there's impact. And maybe it's not defined as well as Ophélie would like, but it does say quite a lot of things about how you estimate impact. Are these two, for me, they're like revolutionary, like big changes, massive changes. There is no other legislation in the world that makes this mandatory. Do you agree, or is it just another dream?
No, I think it's something really positive. If we talk about the transition plan with a forward-looking vision, is something which is key, because everyone says that we need to invest in transitioning company because they need money to do this transition. But for me, having the data and be able to say, okay, this company have a clear transition plan and this is not sufficient as an investor to say, okay, I have a sustainable fund which invests in transition. Because you have two things to do. You have to select the right companies, but after you have to actively engage with this company to be sure that they will stay on this transition plan, they will respect their commitments and be able to divest if you are not happy with that. And today we have a big, let's say, challenges around the impact of engagement of asset managers, because it needs a lot of energy to really engage with transitioning company. We have really few tools available to put pressure on that company, to push them to really take seriously these challenges of transition. And when I heard everywhere that, yes, we need to finance the transition, I'm really agree, but I'm really afraid that tomorrow transition will be the new greenwashing pocket for funds, because it will be just a way for sustainable funds to continue invest in fossil fuel, for instance. But if you show no clear commitment from the asset manager on engagement with the company, on escalation procedure going to divestment, for me it's really risky. Then it's good to have the data with CSRD. Today we mainly use science-based target initiative, for instance, to assess it, or some proprietary methodologies, and it will be good to feed this initiative and to give information to asset manager. But selecting company which has transition plan is not, for me, sufficient to say I'm a responsible investor investing in transition. And that's the same for impact. It's not because a company have a positive impact with product and services that if you invest in, you're doing impact investing. Behind impact investing, you have three main pillars, which is intentionality, additionality, and measurability. And you are quite okay with intentionality if you select ex-ante companies which will be really producing a positive impact, integrated concept of double materiality, etc. But if you have no engagement, not all the additionality procedure to make this impact bigger, and you are not able to measure it properly, it's not impact investing. Then you need to select properly the company, but after you need a huge commitment from the asset manager to be able to say, I'm impact. Then data is good, but we need, I think, more to make it properly. And today there is many, let's say, related concepts which are related to impact investing within the regulation, but impact is not clearly defined as a category or something. At the end of the day, you talk about impact when you talk about double materiality, when you talk about the concept of sustainable investment, even when you talk about Article 9, there is this concept of intentionality behind. Then there is many touch of impact investing, but there is nowhere a category or a clear definition, as Ophélie say, of, okay, this will be impact investing.
Okay. Chiara?
Yes, I think like here, once again, a really important word that is engagement. I think indeed engagement plays a really important role in how investment can be impactful. Nowadays, I can always refer to the regulation on my side. We are seeing many initiatives at the European level that are trying to say how to engage with investing company. Unfortunately, not all of them are implementable for asset manager, and that poses serious challenges. And recently, like we are entering now the phase of trilogue for the multiple voting directive. So basically on the Listing Act directive that was merging different proposals, they are discussing about how there's going to be multiple voting with a ratio to from 1 to 12 in place. And that means that investors will have even less chance to engage, to have leverage on the investing company. So I think like we have to really be step back, look at the general picture, and understand how really investor can play a role in being impactful in many aspects, and not only the E and the S, but also the G, as we were saying at the beginning of the conversation.
I mean, I confess, I mean, I've always had, I don't know why would it not, this issue of additionality, we're not going to go in there because I know that it's a massive debate, and you know, it's like talking about taxonomy, you can only fight about it. So, but I could never understand why investing in a company that is doing the right thing should not be considered impactful, just because
it is impactful, but it's not impact investing.
It is impactful.
It's just a passive approach.
Yeah. And how do you measure the right thing? Like, what do you phrase as company that do the right thing? Like, which
the easy one: solar panel, biological agriculture.
But there is another problem. For example, what we are seeing when you get solar panel, for building solar panel, you need to repair resources, primary resources in market that are emerging markets. And if some of the directives that are proposed at the moment will be implemented and will include the financial services, it will be challenging for us due to due diligence requirements to invest in emerging markets. Still, it's important. I think it's really, there are a lot of shade in defining what is a good company, and that's what makes really difficult to select, I think, on our side.
I totally disagree there, but we're not going to go there completely.
But let's be clear, the needs we have in terms of financial needs, I mean, regarding the transition, are so huge that one should not be exclusive to the other. It's really an ecosystem regarding the impact investing or engaging, because you make the companies moving to the right direction, even if their solution and product is not as such solutions to ESG challenge. So one is not exclusive to the other, and I don't think it opens the door to greenwashing, because again, the key is transparency and disclosure. It's not because you finance some transition companies that you cannot be super clear on what you are investing and why you are investing. In terms of engagement, also report on what you have done, in terms of voting, what you have done. So it's very important that you are transparent, that you disclose with a lot of details and as much as you can, to give this sincerity and honesty in terms of what you do. Maybe it's not perfect, but you are doing things, and that's why we were quite fun, if I may say, regarding SFDR, because in the beginning, initially speaking, it was a disclosure regulation. You say what you do and you do what you say. But of course, the details, the devil is in the details, and there are some biases due to some weaknesses and immaturity of the regulation.
No, what I meant is, you know, there's been talking at some point about the green bubble, no? That all these green assets were too expensive, their multiples were too high. And we know that high multiples are a good thing. They attract investment. It's not true that they destroy money, no? I mean, Tesla became who they became, and EVs are becoming a reality because of these silly multiples of Tesla, which obliged, because of the reweighting of the benchmarks, obliged people to buy Tesla, no? Even when the valuation was just, you know,
even
insane.
if it's not at all a sustainable company, but
well, from a Yeah, I can't go there. It might be my client in the US. I haven't said anything about Tesla. So but anyway, so I was wondering, we need to, sorry, our time is really running out. It's been 45 minutes already. I was wondering, Luca was looking at me with massive disapproval. But maybe in the room there's a question for our panelists. I was wondering, is there something you strongly disagreed with or agreed with, or something you would like to know from this great panelist of ours? Do I see a hand? I'll bring you a. There's a question there. Luca, can I? Just a question from the room. Just one. Just one.
Okay. No, it was just a comment on what you had just said, because I actually agree more with what Chiara just said, because if you bring up what you call a very positive environmental objective like the solar panel, then you have to go back to the supply chain and you have to see what kind of sectors there. So having a very simplistic approach, what you have just described, okay, doing good is already impactful, maybe it's not enough. And then this where Chiara comes in and say, okay, but you have to consider, okay, the mines where the solar panel materials are produced, and then you have to consider what kind of labor is employed to produce solar panels. So not being in a sector which is environmentally friendly or allegedly has an impact, which is a positive impact on the environment, doesn't necessarily mean that it has a positive impact in the sense that impact is defined. So you have additionality, which is private equity, but I mean, it's very simplistic, so you have to be...
I think this is a misunderstanding. We have 5 do no significant harm in the taxonomy. I've put one of those, so we all agree that, of course, doing solar panels is not good enough. Last comment from you? No. Luca says no. Sorry. I know there was a comment on impact there, but there you go. So I think we'll wrap this up by thanking massively, with a big applause, Ophélie, Coline, and Chiara. And thank you for your patience. Thank